Okay, I'm 1,
2,
3, 4,
5, 6. Who here has heard of Tim Burton? Probably all of you. The reason you guys have heard of Tim Burton, it might be because his hair looks like Einstein's hair. It might be because you're talking about a new movie that he's coming out with, or it might be because he uses a lot of dark elements that creep you out or you really like it. In this speech, we're going to talk about Tim Burton as a writer, producer, and director. We're going to touch base on his vivid characters, his imagery, and his storylines. He's been a professional director, producer, and writer for 24 years, and he's come out with 21 movies. Each movie has shown a little bit of who he is as an artist and a visionary. In fact, the San Francisco Chronicle said, if you made a sketch on a napkin, we'll show you the napkin. This process art is important in showing Burton's original intention and gives people an insight into the way Tim Burton creates. What's funny is, like, who knew that something so dark would start at the most magical place on earth? Tim Burton was born in Burbank, California, where he still lives with his wife, Helen Carter. And he was actually dating a young lady at the time, and he was able to get connected with Disney, and he worked on staff with Disney. There he created his short story, Vincent, which was kind of like, it just circulated through the employees. It didn't really get any airtime. But Disney liked it so much that they let him do interpretations of Hansel and Gretel and Frankenweenie, his own interpretations of it. After that, he had a lot of success as an independent producer, and he was actually offered to direct a movie called The After Hours, which was turned down by Martin Scorsese. Big things were coming in small packages. In 1985, 2 years before I was born, he actually directed Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which actually grossed $40 million in the box office. And if you guys have seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, you obviously know what was to come after you saw that. 3 years later, he came out with Beetlejuice, which starred Michael Keaton. The movie grossed $80 million in the box office, won 2 Oscars, and actually had 4 seasons on ABC as a series. In 1989, Warner Brothers asked him to do Batman, which obviously was based on the comic book. At the time, it was the biggest marketing campaign for any movie there was, and the movie in the box office grossed $400 million. 1 year later, he came out with Edward Scissorhands, which is a little bit different. It was a more darker movie about a gentleman who was born with scissors for hands and the life he would live based on that. After that, he had so much success that they offered to do a Batman sequel called Batman Returns, which didn't do as good in the box office, but it still did good for what it was. Tim Burton was on top of the world and decided to return to his roots. After that, he came out with The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is a collaboration with Danny Elfman, which is basically about Halloween characters, what they would do if they got a hold of Christmas and how they would manipulate it. After that, he came out with a movie called Cabin Boy, which I'm sure you guys have never heard of. The reason being is because it was horrible. It bombed, and after Cabin Boy, even with all success, they started to say he was the worst director of all time because of Cabin Boy. So what was funny is after Cabin Boy, Tim Burton came out with a movie called Ed Wood, which was actually based on who people say was the worst director of all time. And it was actually a masterpiece, and it got acclaim all across the boards from all the critics. After his success as Ed Wood, they asked him to do a final installment in the trilogy, Batman Forever. With Warner Brothers, he had some casting troubles, and finally, after a couple years, they were able to resolve it and release the movie. After the trouble with Warner Brothers, Tim Burton refused to follow suit, and he released a few titles for creative purposes before returning to mainstream success. After that, he came out with Mars Attacks and James and the Giant Peach. I'm sure you guys have heard of those. They came out, they were nationally released, but they didn't really get much attention. They got some attention, but they weren't what everyone was used to. After that, he came out with Sleepy Hollow, which was a big deal for him because that's when he came into contact with Johnny Depp, and their future relationship would endure through that. It actually won an Oscar for Best Art Direction. In 2000, he came out with Planet of the Apes, which is a remake of the original, but actually got a lot of criticism for being not as dark as the original, and critics pretty much hated it. And Todd McCarthy from Variety magazine actually said it simply wasn't exciting or imaginative, which obviously isn't what Tim Burton is known for. He's known for the converse of that. In 2003, he came out with Big Fish, and that starred Helen Carter, which is his wife. That's where they met. They met on the set of Big Fish. It had 4 Golden Globe nominations, and it actually won an Academy Award. Tim Burton really came into households nationwide with his newfound skill for providing his dark element to family films. In 2006, he came out with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which was a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It starred Johnny Depp, and it grossed over $207 million worldwide. In the same year, he came out with The Corpse Bride, which also starred Johnny Depp and Helen Carter, and it was his darkest animation to date, and it really captured his unique ability to have different characters and contrast elements of lightness and darkness. In 2007, ironically, he came out with one of his most popular films, which was Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, which is a remake of a Broadway play. He actually won the Academy Award for Best Art Innovation, and Johnny Depp went on to win a Golden Globe for Best Actor. Recently, he came out with the movie 9, which is an apocalyptic cartoon. And in 2010, he actually plans on releasing Alice in Wonderland, which is obviously a remake of the Disney classic. When you look at it, it isn't hard to see why Tim Burton is a legend in the movie industry. He's not only a legend due to his elements of the cinematography and his creative mind, but due to the relationships he possesses. Whether it's fooling around with Michael Clark Duncan on the set of Entertainment Weekly, and Michael Clark Duncan said, "I call Tim Burton a mad scientist because he looks weird." Or whether it's Johnny Depp being interviewed by Wikipedia and he says, "He's a brother, a friend, and he's the father of my godson. He's the father of my sons. Someone I would go to the end of the earth for, and I know he would do the same for me." It doesn't matter whether his darkness creeps you out, whether his character is going to appeal to you, or whether you really like it. What you can say about Tim Burton is he's a visionary. And he's the only director, producer, and writer who's able to appeal to audiences of all demographics with gothic elements and dark elements. He's an individual, and because he's an individual, he's been able to achieve the success that has come upon him. Thank you.